metal doors of the interview room opened with a soft hiss. General Vexithara walked inside, her forearms moving in perfect rhythm. The chains around her wrists clinked softly with each step. She was tall, almost 8 feet, with dark blue skin and large compound eyes that could see in directions humans could not imagine. Across the room sat Zara Chen, a human journalist with short black hair and nervous eyes. She held a recording device in her shaking hands. This was the first time any human had been allowed to speak with a high-ranking alien officer since the war ended 3 months ago. The space station called Harmony's Edge floated in neutral space, far from both human and alien territories. Its white walls were bare except for a single window showing the stars outside. 2 guards stood by the door, their weapons ready but not pointed at anyone. Vexithara sat down in the specially made chair. Her cybernetic implants covered half her skull, replacing parts that had been destroyed in battle. Metal plates and wires showed where flesh used to be. She had been one of the Calthonian Empire's greatest generals before the war changed everything. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview," Zara said. Her voice was steady, but her hand still trembled slightly. "The galaxy wants to understand what happened during the Centauri conflict." Vexithara's compound eyes focused on the human. She had seen many humans during the war, but this was different. This human was not holding a weapon. She was not trying to kill or capture. She just wanted to talk. "I have remained silent for good reasons," Vexithara said. Her voice was deep and had a strange musical quality that all Calthoians possessed. "What I have to say will not bring comfort to anyone." Zara leaned forward. "The Galactic Council says humanity won through luck and determination. They say it was an unexpected victory against superior forces. Is that true?" A sound came from Vexithara's throat. It might have been laughter, but it sounded more like pain. "Luck? Determination? Your leaders do not understand what they are talking about. They were not there. They did not see what I saw." "Then tell me what you saw." Vexithara was quiet for a long moment. Her secondary arms moved restlessly while her primary arms stayed still on the table. This was unusual behavior for a Calthonian. They were known throughout the galaxy for being calm and controlled. "We thought this would be easy," she finally said. "Humans had smaller ships, fewer weapons. No real military history compared to the great powers of the galaxy. Our intelligence report said you had never won a major space conflict." Zara nodded. "That's all true. Earth's military was considered weak by galactic standards." "Weak." Vexithara repeated the word like it tasted bad. "We use that word too. We called humans weak, soft, unprepared. We thought you would surrender after the first real battle. We thought you would beg for mercy when you saw our true power. But we didn't surrender. No, you did not surrender. And that was when we began to learn the first lesson about humanity." Vexithara's eyes seemed to look through Zara, seeing something far away. "You see, in all our studies of human culture, we missed something important. We looked at your peace treaties, your trade agreements, your diplomatic solutions. We thought these showed weakness." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "We never studied what humans do when peace is no longer possible." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean that every species in the galaxy has limits. Push a Calthonian too far, and we become aggressive but predictable. Push a Zephyrian too far, and they retreat to defend their core territories. Push a crystalline too far, and they negotiate for better terms." Vexithara's forearms moved in a gesture that might have been a shrug. "But humans? When you push humans too far, something else happens. Something we had never seen before." "What happens?" Vexithara was quiet again. Outside the window, stars moved slowly as the station rotated. The silence stretched until Zara wondered if the general would speak again. "Tell me about the first battles," Zara said. "The reports say humanity lost every major engagement in the first month." "Yes, you lost." Vexithara's voice became stronger. "You lost ships, you lost colonies, you lost thousands of lives. By every measure we understood you were defeated. Your military should have collapsed. Your government should have asked for terms. But your survivors kept fighting. Not just fighting. They fought in ways that made no sense. Human ships with critical damage continued attacking even when they could have escaped. Human soldiers fought until they died, even when surrender would have saved their lives. Human civilians picked up weapons and charged at our forces instead of running away." Zara wrote notes quickly. "This confused your forces?" "Confused is too small a word. We were terrified." The admission seemed to surprise Vexithara herself. "Calthoians do not feel terror easily. We are warriors bred for conflict, but watching humans die for no strategic gain, watching them throw their lives away for meaningless victories, it was like watching madness spread through your entire species. Why was this terrifying? Vexithara looked directly at Zara. Because it meant our calculations were wrong. Everything we thought we knew about warfare, about surrender, about reasonable behavior, none of it applied to humans. We were fighting an enemy that did not follow any rules we understood. She leaned forward and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. And then we began to notice other things. Strange things. Human forces that should have been destroyed kept appearing in new places. Human weapons began working in ways they should not have worked. Human tactics started changing faster than we could adapt to them. What kind of changes? Changes that should have taken months of study and planning. Changes that required understanding technology you had never seen before. Changes that meant humans were learning from every defeat, every death, every moment of the war. Vexithara's cybernetic implants glowed slightly as her emotions rose. It was as if every human death made the rest of your species stronger and smarter. Zara felt her heart beating faster. What are you saying? I am saying that we won every battle but started losing the war from the very first day. Because each victory taught humanity something new about us. Each defeat taught humanity something new about themselves. Vexithara stood up suddenly, her chains rattling, and we were too proud and too stupid to understand what was happening until it was far too late. The general walked to the window and stared out at the stars. Your news reports call it humanity's great victory. Your politicians talk about brave soldiers and clever tactics. Your historians will probably write about human courage and determination. She turned back to Zara. But they are all wrong. This was not a victory. This was not even a war, not really. Then what was it? Vexithara's compound eyes reflected the starlight, making her look alien and frightening. It was humanity's entrance examination into the real galaxy. And the horrifying truth is that you passed with perfect scores. She sat back down and her voice became deadly serious. You want to know why we surrendered after winning every major battle? Because we finally understood what humans truly are when cornered, and that knowledge will haunt the galaxy for generations to come. The recording device in Zara's hand suddenly felt very heavy. She realized that this interview was not going to be about human victory at all. It was going to be about something much more frightening. Something that would change how every species in the galaxy looked at humanity forever. Zara leaned forward in her chair. Tell me about the beginning. What made your empire decide to attack humanity? Vexithara's forearms moved in a pattern that showed deep thought. It was not just the Calthonian Empire. We formed the largest military alliance in galactic history. The Zephyrian Collective brought their quantum ships. The crystalline hegemony provided their energy weapons. 3 of the galaxy's greatest powers, working together against one species that had barely left their home system. Yes. It seemed reasonable at the time. Vexithara's voice carried a bitter tone. Humans had spread to maybe 30 star systems. You had built some colonies, established some trade routes, but your technology was hundreds of years behind ours. Your military was small and inexperienced. She paused, looking out the window at the stars. The war planner said it would take 3 weeks. Some optimists thought it might take only 1 week. We prepared for a quick conquest followed by a peaceful occupation. What changed your minds? The first battle should have ended everything. We attacked your outer defense perimeter with a fleet of 300 ships. Humanity sent 47 vessels to meet us. Vexithara's cybernetic implants hummed softly as she accessed old memories. We destroyed 39 human ships in the first hour. The remaining 8 should have retreated or surrendered. But they didn't. They did something that made no sense. The 8 surviving ships scattered in different directions. We thought they were running away, so we ignored them and moved toward human colonies. Vexithara's compound eyes focused on something Zara could not see. 6 hours later, those 8 ships attacked our supply convoy. They had somehow learned our travel routes and predicted where we would be. Zara wrote notes quickly.
How was that possible?
We did not know then. We thought it was luck or good intelligence. We destroyed the 8 ships and continued with our plans. But that pattern kept repeating. Every time we won a battle, the surviving humans would disappear and then attack us somewhere else we did not expect. That sounds like guerrilla warfare. Nothing unusual about that. Vexithara made a sound that was definitely not laughter. Guerrilla warfare requires preparation, knowledge of local terrain, hidden supplies, communication networks. Humans had none of these things. They were fighting in open space with ships that were damaged and cut off from their main forces. She stood up and began pacing the small room. But they kept finding ways to hurt us. They would use wreckage from destroyed human ships to build traps for our vessels. They would hack into our communication systems using technology they should not have understood. They would appear exactly where our defenses were weakest, as if they could read our tactical plans. Maybe they were just good at adapting. Adapting? Vexathara stopped pacing and stared at Zara. Let me tell you about the Colony 7 incident. We conquered the human settlement in less than 4 hours. Standard occupation procedures. We set up our command post, established patrol routes, began processing the human civilians. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong. Everything went according to plan for exactly 12 days. Then the human civilians began their resistance. Vexthara's voice became quieter. But this was not normal resistance. These were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, children. They had no military training, no weapons, no experience with warfare. Yet they fought back. They did more than fight back. They studied us. Vexathara returned to her chair, her movements now showing agitation. In 12 days, these civilians learned our daily routines, our shift changes, our equipment maintenance schedules. They learned which foods made us sick, which sounds hurt our hearing, which lights damaged our vision. Zara felt a chill. How could they learn all that so quickly? That was the question that began to haunt our commanders. How could untrained humans learn in 12 days what took our military academy students months to understand? How could they build effective weapons from farming equipment and household materials? How could they coordinate attacks without any communication system we could detect? Vexthara's cybernetic implants glowed brighter as her emotions rose. The worst part was watching them die. When we finally crushed their resistance, these human civilians fought to the very end. But they were not angry or afraid. They were curious. Even while dying, they were studying our weapons, our tactics, our reactions. That doesn't sound human. That is exactly what we thought. But we were wrong. It was perfectly human. We just did not understand what being human truly meant. Vexthara leaned back in her chair. After Colony 7, we began hearing similar reports from every human world we conquered. Civilians who learned too quickly, resistance fighters who adapted too fast, survivors who seemed to understand us better than we understood ourselves. What did your commanders think was happening? At first, we blamed our intelligence services. We thought humans had better spy networks than we realized. Then we blamed our own soldiers, thinking they were not following security protocols. But the reports kept coming from every front, every battle, every occupied world. Vexthara was quiet for a moment, then continued. The breakthrough came when we captured a human command center intact. We found their tactical computers, their communication logs, their planning documents. We thought we would finally understand how they were doing it. And the computers contained detailed analysis of every alien species in our alliance, technical specifications for our weapons, behavioral profiles of our commanders, strategic assessments of our strengths and weaknesses. Vexthara's voice became hollow. All of this information was incredibly accurate. But here is the strange part. According to the timestamps, humans had written these reports during the battles themselves. Zara stopped writing. During the battles? While fighting for their lives, while their ships were being destroyed, while their people were dying, humans were taking notes. They were studying us like we were laboratory specimens. They were treating the war like what? Like a learning experience. Vexathara said the words very slowly. Every battle was a chance to understand us better. Every defeat was a source of new information. Every dead human had somehow shared their knowledge with the survivors before dying. The room became very quiet. Outside the window, stars continued their ancient dance across the darkness. That was when our military planners began to worry. Vexthara continued. We were winning every engagement, but we were also teaching humanity everything about us. Our weapons, our tactics, our psychology, our weaknesses. All of it was being absorbed and analyzed by an enemy that seemed to have unlimited capacity for learning. Did you change your strategy? We tried. We began using new tactics, different weapons, unpredictable patterns, but it did not matter. Vexthara's compound eyes reflected the starlight. Humans adapted to every change faster than we could implement new ones. It was like fighting an enemy that could predict our thoughts. She stood up again and walked to the window. By the end of the second month, our casualty reports were concerning. We were still winning every battle, but we were losing more ships and soldiers than the war planners had predicted. Meanwhile, human forces were becoming more effective despite having fewer resources. How much more effective? Human ships began exhibiting capabilities that should not have been possible with their technology. Human soldiers started using tactics that were clearly adapted from our own playbooks but improved in ways we had never considered. Human civilians began building weapons that combined their technology with ours in configurations that made no engineering sense. Vexthera turned back to Zara. And then came the incident that changed everything. The siege of Kepler Station. That was when we learned the truth about what we were really fighting. She sat back down and her voice became deadly serious. That was when we discovered that humans are not just good at learning. They are something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen before. What happened at Kepler Station? Vexthara's cybernetic implants flickered. That is a story that will give you nightmares. But it is a story that must be told. Because it explains why the greatest military alliance in galactic history chose surrender over victory. Zara's pen stopped moving across her notepad. Tell me about Kepler Station. Vexthara was quiet for a long time. Her forearms moved in nervous patterns and her cybernetic implants flickered like dying stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Kepler Station was humanity's last major stronghold. Everything else had fallen to our forces. Earth itself was under siege. The station held maybe 10,000 humans, soldiers, civilians, families who had nowhere else to run. How many ships did you bring to attack it? 500,000 soldiers, 200 warships, the most advanced siege equipment in the galaxy. Vexthara's compound eyes reflected the memory. We surrounded the station completely. No escape routes, no possibility of rescue, no hope of survival for the humans inside. She stood up and began pacing again. Our calculations said the siege would last 3 days. The humans had limited food, limited power, limited ammunition. Basic mathematics said they could not hold out longer than 72 hours. But they did? They held for 3 weeks. The words came out like a confession of guilt. 3 weeks against impossible odds. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what they did during those 3 weeks. Zara leaned forward. What did they do? They studied us. Vexthara stopped pacing and gripped the back of her chair. While we bombarded their defenses, while we cut off their supplies, while we prepared for the final assault, the humans inside that station were conducting the most detailed analysis of our forces that had ever been attempted. How do you know this? Because they told us. Vexthara's voice became hollow. On day 5 of the siege, we intercepted a transmission from inside the station. We thought it would be a surrender offer or a plea for mercy. Instead, it was a detailed report on the weaknesses in our shield generators. She began pacing again, her movements quick and agitated. The report was completely accurate. It described flaws in our technology that our own engineers had not discovered. It explained how our shields could be penetrated using specific frequency combinations. It even included suggested improvements to make our defenses stronger. Why would they help you improve your defenses? That was what we wondered too. So we listened to more transmissions. The humans were not just analyzing our shields. They were studying everything. Our ship designs, our weapon systems, our tactical formations, our command structure, even our personal behavior patterns. Vexthara sat back down, her cybernetic implants glowing steadily. By day 10, they were broadcasting detailed psychological profiles of our commanders. They knew which officers made decisions based on logic, which ones were influenced by emotion, which ones could be manipulated through specific types of pressure. How could they know all that? Because they were watching. Every attack we made, every order we gave, every movement of our ships, they were recording it all and analyzing it with a level of detail that was unnatural. Vexthara's voice carried a note of fear. They turned their entire station into a laboratory and we were the test subjects. Zara felt goosebumps on her arms. What happened when you finally broke through their defenses? That was when we learned the truth about human warfare. Vexthara's compound eyes seemed to look through the walls of the interview room. When our forces entered the station, we expected to find broken defenders, desperate civilians, maybe some last-minute resistance from cornered soldiers. What did you find instead? We found humans who had spent 3 weeks preparing for our arrival. Not just preparing weapons or defenses, preparing knowledge. She leaned forward, her voice becoming intense. Every corridor we entered had been modified based on their analysis of our movement patterns. Every trap they set used our own technology against us in ways we had never considered. They had captured your technology? No, they had understood it. Vexithara's cybernetic implants flickered rapidly. Let me give you an example. We used energy rifles that fired controlled plasma bursts, standard military equipment, used by dozens of species across the galaxy. When our soldiers entered Section C of the station, they found humans using modified versions of our own rifles. Modified how? The humans had somehow increased the power output by 30%, while reducing energy consumption by half. They had added targeting systems that were more accurate than our originals. They had even improved the cooling system to prevent overheating during rapid fire. Vexithara's voice became quiet. They had made our weapons better than we had. How is that possible? They had never seen your technology before the war. That was what we thought too. But during the siege they had captured several damaged rifles from our earlier attacks. In 3 weeks they had completely reverse-engineered them, understood how they worked, and improved the design. Vexithara stood up again, her movements now showing real agitation. But here is the terrifying part. They did not just improve the weapons. They understood the science behind them. What do you mean? I mean they could explain why their modifications worked. They had learned the principles of plasma containment, energy conversion, targeting algorithms, advanced concepts that take our engineers years to master. And they learned it all while fighting for their lives. Zara put down her pen. That's impossible. That is what we said too. But the evidence was undeniable. Vexithara walked to the window and stared out at the stars. In Section D we found humans using our own communication equipment to coordinate their defense. But they were not just using it, they were using it better than we did. Better how? They had figured out how to encrypt their signals using our own security protocols, but with modifications that made them impossible for us to decode. They were communicating right in front of us, using our own technology, and we could not understand what they were saying. She turned back to Zara. In Section F, they had taken apart one of our medical scanners and rebuilt it into a weapon that could disrupt our cybernetic implants from a distance. In Section G, they had modified our atmospheric processors to create poison gas that was specifically designed to affect Calthonian physiology. They learned about your biology too? They learned about everything. Vexithara's voice carried a note of horror. During those 3 weeks they had studied captured Calthonian equipment, Zephyrian crystals, crystalline energy matrices. They had learned the basics of 3 different alien technologies and figured out how to combine them in ways that none of our species had ever attempted. What happened when you finally captured the station? We won, technically. Vexithara returned to her chair, moving slowly like an old creature carrying a great weight. The human defenders were killed or captured. The station fell under our control. By every military measure, it was a complete victory for our forces. She was quiet for a moment, then continued. But our casualty reports were disturbing. We had lost 12,000 soldiers taking a station defended by 10,000 humans. In conventional warfare, attackers need numerical superiority to overcome defensive positions. We had 50-to-1 odds and barely achieved victory. That must have concerned your commanders. Concerned? They were terrified. Vexithara's cybernetic implants glowed brighter. But the real horror came later, when we examined what the humans had accomplished during the siege. We found detailed technical manuals they had written about our technology. We found strategic analyses of our military doctrine. We found cultural studies of our 3 species that were more accurate than our own anthropological reports. How detailed were these reports? Detailed enough to predict our behavior with frightening accuracy. Detailed enough to exploit weaknesses we did not know we had. Detailed enough to turn our own strengths against us. Vexithara leaned forward, her voice becoming urgent. Do you understand what this means? In 3 weeks, while surrounded and under constant attack, humans had learned enough about us to become a genuine threat to our entire civilization. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. What did your commanders do with this information? They classified everything and tried to pretend it had not happened. But word spread through our military. Soldiers began talking about the humans who fought like scientists, who treated every battle like a research project, who learned from defeat faster than we could learn from victory. She stood up once more and walked to the window. And then came the reports from our other fronts. Human forces that had been completely destroyed were somehow reappearing with new tactics and improved weapons. Technology that should have taken years to develop was showing up in human hands within weeks of their first encounter with it. They were sharing information somehow. More than sharing. They were evolving. Vexthara's reflection in the window looked haunted. Every defeat made them stronger. Every victory we achieved taught them something new. Every piece of our technology they encountered became part of their arsenal. She turned back to Zara with compound eyes that reflected the starlight like mirrors. After Kepler Station, our military leaders began to understand a terrible truth. We were not fighting a war against humanity. We were conducting an education program for the galaxy's most dangerous students, and they were learning fast? Faster than anything we had ever seen. Faster than should have been possible. Vexithara's voice dropped to a whisper. The silence in the interview room stretched for several minutes. Zara watched as Vexithara stared out at the stars, her cybernetic implants flickering like a broken communication device. Finally, the alien general spoke again. After Kepler Station, everything changed. The war stopped following any pattern we understood. Her voice was distant, as if she was talking to herself. Our intelligence reports became strange. Impossible things were happening across all fronts. What kind of impossible things? Vexithara turned away from the window and sat down heavily. Human ships that we had personally destroyed began appearing in new sectors. Not similar ships. The exact same vessels with the same identification codes, the same battle damage, but somehow repaired and improved. Maybe you had misidentified the ships. We thought so too, until we started finding wreckage from the same ships in multiple locations. Ship registration NK-447 was destroyed at the Battle of Proxima, but 3 weeks later it attacked our supply convoy near Vega. We found debris from NK-447 at both battle sites. Vexithara's compound eyes moved in patterns that showed confusion. According to our records, that ship died twice. Zara wrote notes quickly. How do you explain that? We could not explain it. Our scientists proposed theories about parallel dimensions, time manipulation, advanced cloning technology, but the simplest explanation was the most terrifying. Humans had somehow learned to rebuild their ships faster than we could destroy them. That seems unlikely. Everything about humanity seemed unlikely. Vexthara's cybernetic implants hummed as she accessed old memories. But the ship problem was just the beginning. Our supply lines started facing attacks that should not have been possible. What kind of attacks? Precise strikes against specific cargo holds containing equipment we had not even told our own soldiers about. Human forces somehow knew exactly which ships carried advanced weapon components, which ones had medical supplies, which ones transported command personnel. She paused. They were reading our shipping manifests better than our own logistics officers. Zara looked up from her notes. They had infiltrated your communication systems? That was our first thought. We changed all our encryption codes, replaced our communication equipment, even started using telepathic species for sensitive messages. It did not matter. Vexithara's voice carried a note of frustration. Human attacks continued with the same impossible accuracy. How were they getting the information? We finally got our answer during the Battle of Titan's Gate. Our fleet was transporting a new type of shield generator, top-secret technology that could have changed the entire war. Only 5 people in our command structure knew about the shipment. Vexithara stood up and began pacing. Human forces attacked our convoy with weapons specifically designed to penetrate that exact type of shield. They had developed counters to your secret technology? Not just counters, improvements. She stopped pacing and gripped the back of her chair. When we examined the weapons they used against us, we found that they were based on our own shield technology, but modified in ways that made them more effective than the originals. How is that possible? Because humans do not just steal technology, they understand it completely and then make it better. Vexithara's voice became quiet. During the battle, we captured some human equipment. Our scientists analyzed it for weeks. Do you know what they found? Zara shook her head. They found technology that combined Calthonian power systems, Zephyrian targeting computers, and crystalline energy matrices, all integrated in ways that should have been impossible. 3 different alien technologies from 3 different scientific traditions, working together perfectly. Your alliance species had never tried to combine their technologies? We had tried for centuries. The basic principles were incompatible. Calthonian power systems used frequencies that disrupted Zephyrian quantum fields. Crystalline energy matrices could not interface with our control systems. Every attempt at integration had failed. Vexithara's cybernetic implants glowed brighter, but humans solved these problems in a matter of weeks. How? By understanding the fundamental science behind each technology, instead of just copying the applications. They learned why our systems worked, not just how they worked. She returned to her chair. That was when our scientific advisors began to panic. Why did that panic them? Because it meant humans were not just adapting to our technology. They were advancing beyond it. They were taking our greatest achievements and treating them like starting points for their own innovations. Vexithara leaned forward. Do you understand what this means for warfare? Zara thought for a moment. It means every weapon you used against them made them stronger? Exactly. Every battle became a technology transfer. Every victory we achieved gave humans access to more of our equipment, which they would then improve and use against us. Vexthara's voice carried a note of fear. We were literally arming our enemies with better versions of our own weapons. Did your commanders change tactics? They tried everything. We started using older, simpler weapons that would be less useful if captured. We began destroying our own equipment rather than risk it falling into human hands. We even attempted to retreat from human space entirely. She was quiet for a moment. None of it worked. Why not? Because humans had moved beyond simply capturing our technology. They were predicting it. Vexithara stood up and walked to the window again. They began broadcasting surrender demands to our forces. Not threats or propaganda. Actual formal surrender documents written in perfect Calthonian, Zephyrian, and crystalline languages. They had learned your languages? More than learned. They had mastered the subtle cultural nuances that each language contained. They knew which words would be most psychologically effective for each species. They understood our honor codes, our social hierarchies, our deepest fears and motivations. Zara felt goosebumps rising on her arms. How could they learn all that during a war? That was the question that haunted our psychologists. These surrender demands showed intimate knowledge of our cultures that should have taken decades of peaceful contact to acquire. But humans had learned it all while fighting us. Vexithara's reflection in the window looked tired and old. The demands were not just translated. They were culturally perfect for each intended audience. What did the demands say? They offered us exactly what each species valued most. Honor and glory for Calthoians, security and stability for Zephyrians, knowledge and discovery for crystallines. She turned back to Zara. But the terrifying part was not what they offered. It was how they demonstrated their knowledge of us. What do you mean? They included detailed analyses of our military strengths and weaknesses. They showed us exactly how they planned to defeat us step by step, using our own technologies and tactics against us. Vexithara's cybernetic implants flickered rapidly. They were not threatening us. They were educating us about our own doom. Did any of your forces surrender? Some did. And that was when we learned the most frightening thing about humanity. She sat back down, her movements slow and deliberate. The ships that surrendered were not destroyed or captured. They were studied. Studied how? Human forces conducted what they called live systems analysis on our vessels. They examined our technology while our crews watched. They asked questions about how our equipment worked, why we had designed it certain ways, what improvements we thought might be possible. Vexithara's voice became hollow. They treated us like consultants helping them understand our own military. What happened to the crews? They were returned to us. Unharmed, but changed. She was quiet for a long moment. They came back with stories about humans who spoke our languages perfectly, who understood our cultures better than we did, who could predict our tactical decisions before we made them. The returned crews must have provided valuable intelligence. They tried, but their reports were so disturbing that our commanders ordered them classified. Stories about humans who could repair our technology faster than our own engineers. Stories about humans who improved our weapons while explaining the modifications in our own technical languages. Vexithara's compound eyes reflected the starlight. Stories about humans who seemed to understand us better than we understood ourselves. What was your personal breaking point? Vexithara was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. It came when my own flagship was boarded by human forces. They did not try to capture or destroy it. They conducted what they called an educational survey of our command systems. What does that mean? It means they studied our technology while we watched helplessly. They asked polite questions about our tactical computers, our communication arrays, our life support systems. They took detailed notes and shared their observations with each other, like researchers conducting a scientific experiment. She stood up and walked to the window one more time. And the worst part? They thanked us for our cooperation when they left. They thanked us for helping them understand Calthonian military engineering. Did they damage your ship? No, they improved it. Vexthera's reflection looked haunted. When they left, our systems were running more efficiently than they ever had before. Our weapons were more accurate, our shields were stronger, our engines were faster. Zara set down her pen and looked directly at Vexthera. Why did you surrender? Your forces still outnumbered humanity. You still had superior technology and more resources. Vexthera remained at the window for a long time, her forearms moving in slow, thoughtful patterns. When she finally turned around, her cybernetic implants were dim, as if she was trying to hide from her own memories. We surrendered because our intelligence division decoded something that changed everything. Her voice was barely above a whisper. They finally managed to break the encryption on human military communications. What they found inside those messages was not what anyone expected. What did they find? They found humans discussing our military tactics with the same tone they might use to discuss an interesting puzzle. They found officers analyzing our cultural weaknesses like students studying for an examination. They found soldiers describing our weapons and technology with the excited curiosity of children discovering new toys. Vexthera walked slowly back to her chair. But the worst thing they found was the way humans talked about casualties. Both their own and ours. What do you mean? When a human ship was destroyed, the surviving crews did not mourn their dead or plan revenge. They discussed what they had learned from the ship's final moments. They analyzed the weapon that destroyed it, studied the tactics that led to its defeat, calculated how to avoid similar losses in the future. Her compound eyes focused on something far beyond the interview room. Every human death was treated as a data point in a larger experiment. Zara felt a chill creep up her spine. That doesn't sound like mourning. They did mourn, but they mourned efficiently, without letting emotion interfere with learning. And that was when our psychologist began to understand something terrible about human nature. Vexthera sat down heavily. Humans do not fight wars to win territories or resources or glory. Humans fight wars to understand their enemies completely. I don't understand. Let me read you something. Vexthera's cybernetic implants glowed as she accessed stored files. This is from a communication we intercepted between two human officers during the siege of Europa Station. The station was surrounded, cut off from supplies, facing certain destruction. She paused, then began speaking in a flat, emotionless tone. Officer Chen to Officer Rodriguez. The Calthonian flanking pattern suggests they prioritize psychological pressure over tactical efficiency. Their shield generators show a 12% weakness to alternating frequency attacks. Recommend testing hypothesis during next engagement, even if it results in total station loss. Zara stared at her. They were willing to sacrifice their own station to test a theory? Officer Rodriguez replied, agreed. Request permission to gather additional data on Zephyrian quantum targeting systems before station destruction. Estimated survival time of crew should allow for 3 more equipment captures. The recording ended, and Vexthera was quiet for a moment. They were calmly discussing their own deaths as if they were planning a research project. They treated their defeat as an opportunity to gather more information about us. That's inhuman. No, that is perfectly human. We just never understood what being human meant. Vexthera leaned forward. Every species in the galaxy fights to survive, to protect their territory, to gain resources. But humans fight to learn, even when learning means dying. But why? Because humans understand something that no other species has ever grasped. They understand that knowledge is the only weapon that grows stronger when you share it, the only resource that increases when you give it away, the only power that becomes more dangerous the more widely it spreads. Vexthera stood up and began pacing again. Our final breaking point came when we realized that humans were not trying to defeat our alliance. They were trying to understand it so completely that defeating it would become trivial. How do you know this? Because they told us. Her voice carried a note of horrified awe. In the final weeks of the war, Human forces began broadcasting detailed strategic analyses directly to our command centers. Not propaganda or threats, actual military assessments of our strengths and weaknesses. Why would they reveal their intelligence to you? Because they wanted us to know that they understood us completely. They wanted us to realize that continuing the war would only give them more opportunities to study us. Vexes. Thara stopped pacing and stared at Zara. They sent us detailed plans showing exactly how they intended to defeat each of our species, using our own psychology and technology against us. Were the plans accurate? They were perfect. Every prediction, every tactical analysis, every psychological assessment was completely correct. They knew how we would react to their strategies before we knew ourselves. Her cybernetic implants flickered rapidly, and the most terrifying part was that they were still learning. Each plan included notes about what additional information they hoped to gather when they implemented it. Zara put down her pen completely. They were treating the war like a research project. Exactly. And we finally understood that we were not their enemies. We were their test subjects. Vexathara returned to her chair, moving like someone carrying an enormous weight. The war was not about territorial conquest or resource acquisition. It was about humanity's entrance examination into the galactic community. Entrance examination? They were studying us to determine whether the galaxy contained any species worth learning from, any technologies worth acquiring, any civilizations worth understanding. She was quiet for a moment. And they were grading their own performance based on how quickly they could master everything we knew. What was their grade? Perfect. They learned everything about us, our science, our culture, our psychology, our technology, our weaknesses, our fears, our dreams. Vexathara's voice became hollow. In less than 8 months of warfare, humans acquired knowledge about our 3 species that our own scientists had taken centuries to develop. That's impossible. We thought so too. But the evidence was undeniable. She leaned forward, her compound eyes reflecting the starlight. After the war ended, human representatives approached each of our governments with detailed proposals for technological cooperation. They offered to share improved versions of our own technologies with us. Improved how? Improved in ways we had never considered, using principles we had never discovered, solving problems we had never known existed. Vexathara's cybernetic implants glowed steadily. They offered to teach us things about ourselves that we had never understood. Did your governments accept? What choice did we have? Humans had demonstrated that they could learn everything about us whether we cooperated or not. At least cooperation meant we might learn something in return. She was quiet for a moment, but that was when we realized the most terrifying truth about humanity. What truth? The war had just been practice for them. A learning exercise, a way to understand how galactic conflicts work, how different species think and fight, how alien technologies can be integrated and improved. Vexathara's voice dropped to a whisper. They studied us the way we might study insects under a microscope. That makes them sound like monsters. No. Monsters would have destroyed us out of hatred or fear or hunger. Humans studied us out of curiosity. They wanted to understand us completely because understanding is what humans do. She stood up and walked to the window one final time, and that is far more terrifying than any monster could ever be. Why are you telling me this? Vexathara turned back to Zara, her reflection in the window making her look like a ghost. Because someone needs to warn the galaxy about what humanity really is. You are not conquerors or destroyers or saviors. You are learners. And now that you have learned everything about us, you will look for new teachers. What do you mean? I mean that humanity has passed its entrance examination into galactic civilization with perfect scores. You understand our technologies, our cultures, our weaknesses, our strengths. You have proven that you can learn anything, adapt to anything, improve anything. Her cybernetic implants flickered like dying stars, and now you will look beyond our small corner of the galaxy, seeking more advanced civilizations to study. Zara felt a cold fear settling in her stomach. Are you saying humans are dangerous? I am saying that humans are the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever produced, because you are the only species that grows stronger every time someone tries to fight you. Every war makes you smarter. Every enemy teaches you something new. Every defeat is just another learning opportunity. She walked back to the table and sat down across from Zara. The rest of the galaxy thinks humanity won a great victory against impossible odds. They think you are brave warriors who overcame superior technology through determination and luck. But that's not what happened. What happened was that humanity demonstrated something that no other species has ever achieved. You proved that knowledge is the ultimate weapon, that understanding is the greatest power, that learning is the most dangerous ability any species can possess. Vexithara's compound eyes reflected ancient fears, and now that you have learned everything we can teach you, you will seek out new instructors. More advanced civilizations? Civilizations that make our alliance look like children playing with toys. Civilizations that have technologies we cannot imagine.